Augie Pullman is not an ordinary 10-year-old boy. He feels like one. He eats ice cream, rides his bike, has an Xbox. The problem is, he doesn't look ordinary. It's his face. The kind of face that makes other kids run screaming off the playground. The kind of face that makes adults shudder and look the other way. Augie was born with a rare facial deformity. He tells people, whatever you're thinking, it's probably worse. He's the main character in R.J. Palicio's best-selling novel called Wonder. As the book opens, and if you haven't read this book, I definitely recommend you putting it on your summer reading list. As the book opens, Augie is starting 5th grade at Beecher Prep. It's a big deal because Augie has never been to school before because he's needed too many reconstructive surgeries on his face. Not surprisingly, not a single 5th grader wants to sit next to him in the lunchroom. Kids make fun of him behind his back. Some mean boys even start this game called the Plague. If you touch Augie, you'll get the plague. It is a rough first year full of ups, but mostly downs. Towards the end of the year, however, the entire 5th grade goes on a 3-day nature retreat. Initially, Augie was too scared to go. He'd never been away from home before. But he ends up having the time of his life, swimming, playing, fitting in almost like all the other kids with regular faces, until the second night of the trip, when his class is watching an outdoor movie with students from several other schools. Midway through the movie, Augie and his friend Jack have to go to the bathroom. And when they see the long line, they decide to take advantage of being out in nature, and they go in search of a tree. As they head into the woods, they pass a few of their classmates, Henry, Miles, and Amos, a few of the mean boys who have built themselves up by tearing Augie down. Fortunately, Augie and Jack pass by unscathed, water a couple of trees, and then they head back to the movie. But on their way out of the woods, they run into another group of boys, a group of 7th graders from a different school who'd skipped the movie in order to smoke in the woods. These older boys do not let Augie and Jack pass by. Immediately, they start making fun of Augie's face. "What happened to your head?" they say. They call him a slew of hurtful names, Freddy Krueger, an ugly freak. Then they block off the path, trapping Augie and his friend. Jack tries to defend Augie, but the older boys shove him to the ground, grinding his little 5th grade face into the dirt. Augie tries to stick up for himself, but they yank his hoodie so hard that he too falls flat on the ground. With both 5th graders down for the count, the group of 7th graders circle around them like lions ready to pounce. But that's when something completely unexpected happens. Those Beecher Prep mean boys, Amos, Miles, and Henry, the ones that they had passed by on their way into the woods, they suddenly show back up. Augie thinks for sure that he is doomed. After all, these are the guys who have made his life miserable throughout the year. But instead of joining in on the attack, Amos, Miles, and Henry unexpectedly start running defense. With the force of a monster truck, they plow into this group of 7th grade boys, giving Augie and Jack just enough time to pick themselves up off the ground and make a run for it. After it's all over, Augie's sweatshirt is torn and his elbow is bleeding badly. But it's when he realizes that his expensive hearing aids have fallen out that he actually starts to cry. Not a few drips down his cheeks, but a big, embarrassing river of snot and tears. Not something that middle school boys are ever supposed to do, let alone in front of other middle school boys. But Augie can't hold it inside any longer. He cries and cries and cries. Miraculously, Amos, Miles, and Henry, they don't leave him alone. They don't even make fun of him. Instead, these former mean boys have this stunning reversal right there in the middle of the woods. They stay with Augie, patting him on the back, saying, "You're okay, dude. It's okay. One of the boys actually puts his arms around Augie and lets him cry it out. You are one brave little dude, you know that? He tells him. After a year of low blows, it is hard to imagine that these three boys are capable of doing anything good. And for sure, Amos, Miles, and Henry are not perfect. Their generous behavior in the woods doesn't cancel out all the bad things they've done in the past. But Augie ends up okay. They put the kibosh on the 7th grade ambush, all because they decided to do something differently. To do something kind. In today's story from Joshua, we meet someone else with an unsavory past, someone else who does something unexpected and different, a woman named Rahab. 2 spies have been sent into Jericho by Joshua, the new military leader of the Israelites. Their mission is to scope out the land that they hope to soon conquer. The spies end up at Rahab's house on the outskirts of the city. Now, Rahab is one of those women you would not put on a list of good people. The Hebrew word zonah, used to describe her scandalous professional life, is translated to go astray. She's a woman, a Canaanite foreigner, and someone who has gone completely astray. With 3 strikes against her, Rahab would be the last person you'd think to do a good thing. Unfortunately, these Israelite spies are not very good at their job because they become detected, and less than a few hours after they have arrived, the king of Jericho sends his own agents to Rahab's house, demanding that she turn over these men. Ironically, these spies are no longer under her roof, but on her roof, where she has hidden them underneath stalks of flax. Outwitting the intelligence agents sent to intimidate her, Rahab sends the king's men on this wild goose chase outside the city gates, saying, "Hurry up, and you can probably still catch them." With 2 men in hiding, and the ones who had been sent to find them running off in the wrong direction, Rahab seems to be the one in charge, the woman calling the shots in this story. Did you notice that we know her name? It's a big deal when a woman gets named in the Bible, especially since no one else in this story gets a name. Not the Israelite spies or the Canaanite agents, not even a male relative or her father. Just Rahab, a name that means wide. When a woman is named in the Bible, it means that the author is trying to tell us something. At the very least, that this story, this person is important, and that we should pay attention. After dismissing the king's agent, Rahab heads up to the roof, striking up a conversation with the foreign spies that she has just saved. As the conversation unfolds, she demonstrates a very fluid understanding of global politics. The Israelite God has been kicking butt and taking names, and this unknown woman from Jericho has been paying attention. "Look," Rahab says to one of the spies, "your God is really the one who's in charge of the heavens above and the earth below." Here she is talking to foreigners about their God. It's a stunning confession of faith for her to make. This woman of the night, a clear enemy, a Canaanite no less, admitting that God is the one who's really calling the shots in the world. Then she begins to negotiate, morphing from a brothel owner into Secretary of State. "Because I have already saved your skin," she tells the spies, "now it is your turn to repay the favor. When the time comes for you to burn this city down, swear to me that my family will be safe." Rahab could have just saved her own skin, asked that they get her out of Jericho when they invaded. But instead, she includes her extended family in the bargaining process. As her name seems to indicate, Rahab widens her reach, expanding her ask, requesting immunity for her entire family. The spies don't have to agree to any of this, but they do. They shake hands on the deal, agreeing to Rahab's terms, giving her a strip of red fabric to tie in her window, alerting enemy troops that her house is off limits. Sometimes people surprise us by doing the unexpected, just like those mean boys, Henry Miles and Amos, who end up rescuing Augie, just like Rahab, a woman with a shameful past and the wrong ethnicity, who ends up recognizing God and saving those spies. Rahab shows up in 3 different places in the New Testament. Both the Apostle Paul and the author of James mention Rahab as a good example of faith, painting her in a very positive light. But most notably, Rahab shows up in the Gospel of Matthew, in the genealogy of Jesus in that very first chapter. In an unusual twist, this Jericho street worker can be found in the Messiah's family tree, which is just to say that even Jesus of Nazareth has crazy relatives. And tracing back through this genealogy, we learn that Rahab is the mother of Boaz. Remember Boaz? He's the man that marries Ruth, the foreign woman in need of roots and stability after sticking by her widowed mother-in-law, Naomi. Just as his mother acted with kindness toward enemy spies, Boaz acted with kindness toward Ruth. The word for kindness used here is a Hebrew word that doesn't have an exact translation, hesed. No single word in English captures its meaning, but when trying to explain what hesed means, translators use words like loving kindness, mercy, loyalty. But none of our English words really do this Hebrew word justice. It's the word that is used in the conversation between Rahab and the spies on top of her roof. Because I have shown hesed to you, she tells them. And the spies reply back, we will also show hesed to you. Unexpectedly, Rahab does this extraordinary act of loving kindness. And in the next generation, her son Boaz does the same. All of this hesed in the family tree of Jesus. Not from perfectly put together people, but from folks who are deeply flawed and yet decide to do something differently. All these accumulated acts of loving kindness stacking up in the genealogy of Jesus. Is it any wonder that he turns the world upside down by preaching about those very things? If you keep reading the book Wonder, 10-year-old Augie does make it through his first year at Beecher Prep. Despite all the teasing and all the times that he gets left out, Augie remains kind and considerate, offering nothing but love and forbearance to all those who are scared off by his deformed face. At graduation, the middle school principal, Mr. Tushman, God help any principal with the word tush in their last name, Mr. Tushman stands up to present the Beecher Award, an award for recognizing greatness, named for Henry Ward Beecher, the famous 19th century preacher and anti-slavery leader. How do we measure greatness? Mr. Tushman asks the packed auditorium. Beecher wrote that greatness lies not in being strong, but in the right using of strength. The person is the greatest whose strength carries up the most hearts. Mr. Tushman gets a bit choked up, pausing for a few seconds. He is the greatest, he finally continues, whose strength carries up the most hearts by the attraction of his own. The Henry Ward Beecher Prize is proudly presented to Augie Pullman. Who would have guessed that a 10-year-old with a deformed face could have had such an impact? Or that middle school mean boys could change direction in the middle of the woods when push comes to shove? Sometimes people surprise us. Rahab was certainly one of those women. No one ever believed that this triple outsider could have an impact on the world, certainly not a positive one. And yet her otherness is not condemned by God. In a subversive move, this outsider becomes an insider. Single-handedly, she redraws the boundaries defining the people of God. Just as her name suggests, Rahab widens the borders, opening up who is in and turning on its head who is out. Now, we live in a world that has a hard time tolerating stories like this, where people don't fall squarely into categories of deserving and non-deserving. The fearful world in which people are striving to make things narrower by closing off borders and getting rid of people who are different. A gunman did it in Orlando 2 weeks ago, saying that nothing good could come from being gay. England did it this week in the Brexit vote, opting to leave the EU, choosing to go it alone. We do it every time that we judge a book by its cover, assuming that nothing good can come from a woman like Rahab. But if she can teach us anything, I think it is about widening God's kingdom, as her name seems to suggest, not narrowing it. I think this is a story that proves that these unexpected acts of loving kindness really can widen and shift our world. Augie Pullman knew how to do this. The mean boys in the woods finally figure it out too. So did this saucy street worker Rahab in the book of Joshua. Loving kindness, hesed, acts that widen God's kingdom rather than narrowing it, moves that mess with our ideas of who is in and who is out. It is these acts of love, these moments of courage and kindness that really can change the world. One of the famous phrases in this book, Wonder, is our deeds are our monuments. Our deeds are our monuments. So this week, what will your deeds be? How will you practice hesed in the world? Amen.